A very popular question that I get asked all the time by the students is, are IELTS examiners very strict? What are they like when they're assessing your, speaking tests or your writing tests? It's a very interesting question, and I hope that I can answer with a little bit of a different perspective. So stay tuned until the end of the video so that you can know everything you need about this very important question. So the first thing I think we can do is look at this from a different perspective. For example, can we actually look at stuff and then generalize that much? For example, can I say, are parents in Brazil or are parents in India very strict? I can't really say it like this. I can't really place this question like this because it really depends on people, or on this case, families. Some families have parents who are a little bit more strict. Some families have parents who are not that strict. So it really depends. I can't just generalize and say, yes, please, all of them, all of the IELTS examiners are extremely strict. So you have to make sure that you do your best. No, we can't really do this because it's not the reality. The reality is that there are, I don't know how many, hundreds or thousands of IELTS examiners all over the world, and they all work in a different way. They all view things and assess things in a different way. All right, but that's not much of an answer, right? I mean, I'm not helping you by saying this. I'm just helping you to understand that we have to look at things from a different perspective. With that in mind, we go to our next point, which is actually answering the question, are they strict or not? So we have to understand that being strict means that people look at things in a different way and in a more harsh way, right? Or in a more difficult way. For example, when I play the part of the examiner with my students and I analyze their speaking tests or their writing tests, I tend to be a lot more strict than if I was doing it in any other situation, like for regular students who are not test students for like IELTS, TOEFL, whatever. And I have this as a philosophy for myself because of something very simple. I don't know what kind of examiner you're going to get. I don't know if the examiner that you get is a nice person and does things in a very light way, and then they always give good scores to people, or if they're extremely strict and picky about what they're trying to assess. So because I don't know that, I think it's better for me to look at everything from the highest possible level, right? So whenever I'm, for example, analyzing a student's writing, whenever I'm correcting a student's writing, what I tend to do is take a look at all of the different aspects, like as many aspects as possible, so that I can give that student a very strict and also a very thorough correction. I look at everything I can, starting from like spelling and then spacing in between words, spacing in between lines. I look at meaning, of course, meaning is very important. I want students to write everything very clearly because that's what I think is going to be the most important thing when it comes to assessing things. Because we have to believe this. I've said this many times in my courses and classes and here on YouTube as well, that for an examiner to give you a good score, what they need to do first is understand what you're trying to say. So if you have this point that you're trying to understand, you have to make sure that that message is being clear, that you're sending the message in a clear way so that the examiner can understand. So that's one point. But there are different criteria, right? So there are 4 criteria that we have to take a look at when you're assessing something. And I try to be extremely picky about that because if I'm not very picky and if I try to look at the student's progress, for example, that could be very misleading because I get to see a student of mine for a period of time. Sometimes it's days, weeks, or even months. So I have students who have been with me studying for the test for like 4 months. So I have seen all of that progress from that student. And because of that, I have this tendency or perhaps this bias of like giving that student a higher score because I've seen the progress. Oh, I know where you came from, so I want to reward that progress. But that's not how examiners see. because they don't know that student. They don't know what the students have gone through. They have an idea, of course, that the test is hard and then students have a hard time studying and preparing and all of this. But they don't know everything. They haven't seen it, right? So it's kind of difficult for them to imagine that. So all that comes to them is not even the student's face, it's just whatever, I'm speaking about the writing, of course. With the speaking, there is a face. But with the writing, it's a cold process, right? It's a cold process of like, oh, I'm here, I got this writing, and I'm gonna analyze it, just thinking about the criteria. That's pretty much it. It's very cold, so there isn't anything emotional that can maybe touch, the examiners and make them give you a better score. So because of this, I always try to look at everything that my students do in a very, very, very strict way, as strict as I can. And this is something that I make clear for all of my students because, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to demotivate them. I don't want to do anything like this. All I want to do is help them understand that it's not a walk in the park, right? It's not that simple. It's not that easy. So they have to do their best because the person who's there, the examiners who are there, they might be extremely strict as well. So it's just better if we work at a very high level because that just makes everything a lot simpler for everybody. So that's pretty much it for this video. In the end, we have a simple but very important lesson, which is you don't know what you're going to expect, right? You don't know what to expect, but perhaps we have always to prepare for the worst. If you're prepared for the worst, everything that comes becomes a whole lot easier. And speaking of writing, we do have an amazing writing course. It is in the link in the description. It's a very cheap course on Udemy, so you can go there, you can take the course, and you can learn everything you want or everything you need for success in the IELTS writing test. And we also have our free course, I've mentioned that so many times by now, also on Udemy on the general parts of the IELTS test. It's more of an introductory course. So make sure you take a look at those, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.